What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the W.A.D.E Concept Podcast. My name is Wade Plemons. I'm your host, as always. No guest this week, unfortunately. Tried to get some people on, but just didn't work out, so we're riding solo. But hadn't got you guys a podcast in a while, so I want to make sure I keep the content coming more frequently for you. Just a couple things. We're still working on the set. Still working on that. Some other things in the background I think you guys are going to be excited about. Just Can't quite spoil it yet, but we got some stuff coming, so be on the lookout. But yeah, the reason I wanted to do the podcast tonight, this Saturday, the 7th, so today is Wednesday the 3rd, I'm recording this podcast. The UFC is having a fight card this Saturday, October 7th, UFC 216 is coming. And there are some barn burners of fights on there. And I've talked about this a little bit with you guys before, but I'm a huge fight fan. And it's something I fell in love with when I lived out in California. A lot of mixed martial arts out there. A lot of, I'm going to say that one more time because I know how to pronounce words. Mixed martial arts. All right. But yeah, out there, I kind of fell in love with, and I'm a big sports guy, and I've always been into football. When I moved out there, I saw the other side of things, the jiu-jitsus and the boxing and the kickboxing and the Muay Thai. And I really started to follow a lot of that. And even started to do some of it myself. So I'm at the entry level, like jiu-jitsu, boxing, very entry level of things. So bear with me if I don't know a lot of the people yet. I'm still learning about the sport. I'm still learning about all of the fighters. But it interests me so much that I wanted to make a podcast for you guys and talk about this week's fights. So we have a couple of big fights. And if you guys aren't big MMA fans, I'm going to try to do my best to explain kind of what's so big about the fights. And a lot of people know like the bigger names like the Conor McGregors and the Ronda Rouseys, maybe even John Jones. But there are some really, really big time fighters, some killers in different divisions that are that you guys will probably see in the next either year or so that are going to break into that mainstream role. Hopefully for the UFC's sake, they need some fighters that can become stars like any company. If you're in the entertainment business, you want to make stars. You want stars to be bred organically and to the public so that they can relate to that person. And also they got to win, right? You got to have winners to be stars. No, you don't see a lot of losers that lose every time they go out there in any sport that are stars. You got to win. You got to be marketable. Obviously, you got to have the looks. You got to be able to talk on the mic. You got to be able to do those things that interest people. And the way this, as weird as it is, this generation loves, people that get on the mic and just shit talk. They get on the mic and say what they got to say, and people like the next burn or who's getting roasted or whatever it is. Like, you got to be savvy on the mic, very witty, have the great look, be able to fight, and just, be able to hold that company role as the top man or the top guy, going to media day, signing autographs, doing Sports Center, doing Good Morning America, like doing those big time shows and being able to represent the company. So the UFC is looking for stars, and I think there's a couple on this card that could really do it. And there's a couple of guys that have been stars in the mixed martial arts world, and so I'm going to try my best to kind of correlate that to you guys if you don't watch a lot of MMA. And I'm not the MMA guru, know all be all, but I really do like the sport, and I'm trying to learn more about it. And the more I learn about it, I think it interests me so much that I want to try to get into more of it. So. And again, I am a white belt, so everybody out there that's a higher belt than a white belt, you guys know my struggle. I'm getting tapped out left and right in practice and in roles and things like that. So I've only been doing it about a couple of weeks. So I've done it, off and on, but a couple of weeks consistently now. So I'm still learning everything, and it's a wake-up call for sure when you go from a sport like football, which I played, to going into jiu-jitsu where, you think you can just use athleticism and dominate that way, and there's so much more technique involved than you realize. So it's just really cool to me, so I want to talk about it. So that's what we're going to do. But yeah, UFC 216, which 216 being the number of pay-per-views they had, this is pay-per-view number 216, is this Saturday, October 7th. Now, I don't know a lot of the main card. I do know a couple of the fights, though, and I wanted to talk about them. So first off, you have in the heavyweight division, you got Derek Lewis and Fabricio Werdum fighting each other, and that's the number 2 heavyweight in the world, Fabricio Werdum, black belt, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His stand-up game is good. He likes to rush at people. But Derek Lewis, the Black Beast. What a nickname. Throws, bombs with his hands. He's got really good hands. Knockout power in those hands, so it's probably not a guy you want to rush. I know Fabricio likes to start pretty quickly. And again, if I'm butchering names, guys, I apologize. But again, some of these names are kind of hard. Fabricio, that's what it is. Fabricio Werdum. And I watched his fight versus Travis Brown where he comes out with a flying head kick, which a guy that size, like I'm a pretty decent size at 6'4", 200. I think he's 230, which is ridiculous for him to get up in the air. And Travis Brown's around 6'7" or 6'8". Like, he's a long guy. And Fabricio Werdum comes out with a jumping kick in the face. Crazy. But both these guys have fought in the heavyweight division's so narrow. There's only a couple of guys you can fight. Both these guys fought Travis Brown. Derek Lewis beat Travis Brown. I think Travis Brown beat Werdum, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I apologize if I get some of these wrong. But it's a good fight, man. It's two guys that are right around that heavyweight title shot kind of contention. You have Fabricio is number 2 in the world. Derek Lewis number 6. You have Alistair Overeem, who's going to be fighting on UFC 218 against Francis Ngannou, which is a monster. If you haven't seen this guy ever, you don't watch MMA, go look up the name Francis Ngannou. He looks like the Mountain from Game of Thrones combined with Shaka Zulu. Like, he looks like he's just a freak. He's crazy. But they're going to be fighting on 218. The top heavyweight in the world right now, Stipe Miocic. Cleveland-born guy. They're all trying to vie for that title. I think this is a good fight. I'm not gonna try to break it now like I know what's happening. I just know Derek Lewis, really big hands, throws bombs, throws a ton of power, can knock you out. I mean, one-shot knockout power is probably the best in the heavyweight division as far as just one punch. And everybody in the heavyweight division can get caught with one punch. It's just you're dealing with guys that are over 240 pounds, so. It's kind of, you get into that territory of weight and height and the power they're throwing around. Guys can get clipped and knocked out in one shot. But Derek Lewis has some even for that level of, that weight class, he has probably the best power, the most powerful shots in the heavyweight division. So, predictions-wise, I mean, I guess because Fabricio, if he gets a hold of you, if you overexert and he can grab onto an appendage and use that jiu-jitsu and use that grappling, it's going to be a long day for Derek Lewis. Could be a rough day. So Derek Lewis can catch him. I would say, the power nod, the one shot in the fight knockout power would have to go to Derek Lewis. If Fabricio can do his thing and pounce on him early and get that grapple and take him to the ground, and if he gets him on the ground, it could be a quick fight. I think Werdum could win by submission early. We've seen Derek Lewis's his cardio probably not the best, which in the heavyweight division it really never is with anybody, maybe besides Kane, Velasquez, so and Stipe obviously. I'll go out on a limb. I'll go. You love knockouts in the UFC, and for all the people that don't, again, watch MMA, like of course the knockouts happen. People love to see a knockout. I just love to see a good fight. And again, being just starting jiu-jitsu, I like it a lot. And now that I can kind of see what's happening in those grappling, those clinches or on the ground and the guard, I find that as much, as interesting or even more so than a knockout sometimes. I mean, obviously a knockout is the quick kind of, that just happened kind of point. But to see guys transition and grappling and moving around and using that technique is just as cool to me. So I'll say Fabricio Werdum in second round submission, maybe rear naked choke or something like that. Again, my predictions are totally worthless. I have no idea what the odds are. I don't know who's supposed to win, but I'm just going off what I'm seeing here. So a black belt in jiu-jitsu, a guy with heavy hands, I feel like Derek Lewis might tank. Second fight, we have, and again, there's 2 other fights on the main card. I just don't know who the people are. I mean, I know Dariush. I've heard Dunham, this Evan Dunham, is coming off a 4-fight win streak after like a 3-fight losing streak. I don't know too much about the fighters, so I don't feel educated enough to give a pick or talk about it because I just don't know. And really what I'm talking about is kind of more the storylines of the MMA going forward. So for Derek Lewis, obviously a win would get him, up toward title contention. He's number 6. He would need, maybe one more big win. For Werdum, he's 40. Back into the career, maybe one more shot at the title. He's had a great career, legend, top 5 heavyweight ever. So for him, I think that's more of trying to salvage that one last ride before he rides off into the sunset. And this is a huge win for him, obviously, over a younger Derek Lewis. So it just depends on I think it really hinges on that first round. Who gets out of the first round cleaner? If Derek Lewis lands big shots in the first round, it could be a long night for Werdum, and it could, it might not get out of the second. If Werdum, does rush him and happens to slip punches and gets, the takedown or whatever and puts him on his back, the submissions are there. Derek Lewis probably isn't the best practitioner of any kind of grappling on his back, but he throws heavy hands. So if you can catch him coming in, that's a W for Derek Lewis. If Werdum takes him down, gets him on the ground, that's going to be a short fight. Probably choke him, get on his back, choke him to sleep. So I'll go Werdum in the second round, rear naked choke. That's going to be that pick for that one. Now, the co-main event, I want to say. Co-main event. Maybe not even the co-main. I think it's just one of the other fights on the main card. We have Demetrius Johnson, the champion of the flyweight division, the 125-pound division, the smallest male division in the UFC. He's 26-2-1, has, I think, a 10-fight winning streak and title defense streak. So he's defended the belt 10 times, going for a record of 11 times, heading into 216, fighting Ray Borg, who is a younger guy. I think... And again, I don't know much about Ray Borg. I know Demetrius Johnson is nicknamed the Mighty Mouse. People are calling him the pound-for-pound best fighter in the UFC and maybe the best to ever fight in the UFC. A lot of people have criticisms over, not criticisms, but why don't the 125 guys, why don't the smaller guys get the main events in these cards, especially a guy that's defending. If this was a heavyweight title fight, if this was John Jones, or if this was even Stipe or Tyron Woodley or somebody defending the belt for a 10th time or 11th time going for a world UFC record, anybody else would get this main event. So, from that perspective, you see the beef from the 125ers from the flyweight division, because Demetrius Johnson deserves, a headlining event. He deserves the main event, especially for his record breaker. But I do understand that the UFC's got to make a buck. And by what I mean by that is, when they make these pay-per-views, they got to get views. They got to get people to buy, obviously. So you got to put the money fight on last, regardless of the belt of who's fighting who. The biggest names are going to go on last, and it might not be what's best for the business of pure mixed martial arts, but for the business of making money, which the UFC desperately needs to do, you got to put the best guys with the biggest names on. So, and the main event is a title fight, is an interim title fight, but we'll get to that. But the flyweight bout, you got Demetrius Johnson, Mighty Mouse, pretty much good at everything from what I've seen. Again, I haven't watched a ton of Mighty Mouse, but I did a little homework. I went back and watched a couple things, and he's a monster, man. If this guy was John Jones height, weight, or he looked like a 170 or a 185er, we're talking about an animal, probably the baddest man on the planet. But because he's smaller, obviously people, I don't want to say try to discredit him or criticize his skills, but it's just not as highlighted as it should be, because this guy is, like I said, probably the greatest ever. You can't deny the man has won 10 straight title defenses, taking on all comers to do that. So good on the ground, great stand up, can end the fight quickly with his submissions, great wrestling, he's got knockout power even to the 125er range. He can knock you out, which, the smaller guys, it's a little bit tougher. They got to rely on, I think it's more technical at that level, because you have to rely on technique, because you're not just going to wing a shot and knock a guy out with one punch. I mean, obviously you can, but at the highest level, at championship level, you're not, no one's going to play that game with you to where they're going to stand and just trade. So I would think that Demetrius Johnson is I think he's the highest. This is the highest favorite in UFC history, this fight. And Ray Borg, I think he's a young guy. I think he's around my age. I think he's 24. And from what I hear of Ray Borg, again, I haven't watched a lot of Ray Borg, but from what I hear, submissions would be his expertise level. And I was watching, I don't know if I was listening or watching to, I think it was the Big Brown Breakdown or one of the podcasts actually breaking the card down from somebody that knows what they're talking about. So go check that out if you guys want more in-depth knowledge. I just like to talk about it because I think it's fun and I want to learn more about it. But I think it was Brendan Schaub was talking about how he is an expert in this one area, this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu submission area. But when you have an expert in one single area, obviously, and the guy that's the greatest of all time at everything, even that expert in that one area might be dominated by the greatest of all time submission game, because there's so much more you have to prepare for, right? And as the fight goes on, I'm sure what would happen is so many people coming, or so many things coming at you with Demetrious Johnson, shooting for takedowns and then faking the takedown, hitting a straight left or a straight right, head kick, like body kick, leg kicks, so many things that he's good at, feinting, doing all those things. Whereas Ray Borg can do those things, but Demetrious Johnson's seen it in better forms from 10 other people, in his last 10 fights. So he's prepared for a lot of the things Ray Borg has, which really, from what I've seen, isn't, I'm not going to say the guy doesn't have stand-up, but he doesn't have, it's not his best quality. His best quality is the submissions. And if you're going to bring one quality, and that's kind of what you're basing your game on, you're basing your fights, the game plan for your fight around, I'm going to get him on the ground and I'm going to strangle him, or I'm going to get a limb, or I'm going to hit him with a big shot and then take him down. But I think Demetrious Johnson is just too skilled, too savvy. I feel like, when you have 10 championship defenses at that level, even veterans that don't have any championship defenses are not getting taken out by a guy with one, I'm not going to say his one skill, but one main skill. So I think Demetrious Johnson, whenever and however, I think he can end it early. Demetrious has some of the best cardio. Obviously, if you're 125 and you don't have cardio, there's something wrong. But I think that Demetrious Johnson, I would say maybe takes it into deep water, maybe fourth round KO or fourth round submission. Again, maybe rear naked choke. Maybe you could see Demetrious, really, really show his skill in a kind of world or record breaking moment. And then that's where things get interesting from there. So, and to kind of, I don't want to go over every division and talk about who I like and everything else, but there's a couple of fighters I really do think are some of the best fighters and have the best potential going forward. So say Demetrious Johnson wins this fight, which I think he will. I think that's a pretty general consensus. Obviously it's fighting, so you never know what could happen, but I do think Demetrious Johnson's the more skilled fighter. Can pretty much do it when and where he wants to. But after that, that's when the real fights kind of line up. Now, UFC 217 is, I think, November or maybe the December card. I think it's the December card. And Madison Square Garden, you have Cody Garbrandt, who is one of my favorite fighters at the moment, versus TJ Dillashaw. There you've got a whole storyline. I'll do a podcast on it when that time comes. That's probably the fight card of the year, in my opinion, that I can't wait to see. There's so many big names on that card, so many great fights. And even this card, there's great fights. But that one's just out of this world. Like I don't think I've seen a card that stacked since maybe UFC 205, and that was, obviously Conor McGregor when he's on a card. And Conor McGregor's my favorite fighter in the UFC right now. How can he not be? He's got all the tools. But this Cody Garbrandt guy has those same tools. And he fights at 135, so that'd be the bantamweight division, up one division from the flyweights. Now, Cody has been on camera saying, in interviews saying that he wants that after he defends his title, if he should win against TJ Dillashaw, he wants the Mighty Mouse fight. And that would be a barn burner. That would be your main event fight. That's what puts you in the main event of these pay-per-views, is when you have a guy like Cody Garbrandt who, again, has a great look, powerful. I'm talking ridiculously powerful, fast hands, great footwork, and again, a lot of 135ers. TJ Dillashaw does too, and that we can get into that at the next podcast. But he has legitimate knockout power at 135, and would come down to fight Demetrious Johnson at 125. That's a fight like that. That is the fight where you look at it and, as good as Demetrius is, what do you do with a guy like Cody Garbrandt, who has shown he can go 5 rounds with Dominic Cruz of all people, who's shown that he can put Dominic Cruz and other heavier guys on their back really quickly, and the speed to not get hit. I mean, in that Cruz fight, if you guys didn't watch it, Cody Garbrandt was kind of a relative unknown, took on the champion at the time, Dominic Cruz, and depending on, I don't know if Dominic had a bad night but Cody looked amazing. I mean, footwork was there. He was barely getting hit. Even when he did get taken down the one time, he scrambled and flipped over and had Dom on the ground, which was crazy. Dominic has this weird movement, and Cody wasn't falling for it, just slipping punches and coming back with hard right hands and hard hooks, and it was landed a nice head kick. It was a good fight. I mean, it went to decision, but Cody won that fight pretty handily. And it looked like he could have ended the fight. He was so confident in himself. He was standing, pointing at him, talking his stuff, which was even more exciting. And a guy like that is what the UFC needs. Not so, to say that you should be just clowning your opponent every single time you're in the MMA octagon. It was just, that star power, that genuine, organic feeling that he had, that he clowned the guy, because that's all. He's a fighter. And for everybody that thought he couldn't hang with the number one guy, he was running circles around him. So that would be the fight. I think that's the fight they need to make. I think that's the fight they're going to make if the chips align the way they do, because Cody's got a tough fight. TJ Dillashaw could easily, I wouldn't say easily, but he could take that title off of him. They've got a whole backstory, and I don't want to get into it here because I would talk about it. It's really cool, but we'll talk about it when that card comes. But yeah, we'll go Demetrius Johnson, second round TKO or submission. That's what I think. And then you have the main event of the evening. You have Tony Ferguson, El Kakui versus Kevin Lee, the Motown Phenom. And this is an interesting fight. On so many levels and for so many reasons, this is an interesting fight. I think, and again, from different things I've heard and seen, obviously I'm soaking up everything, from the weigh-ins that are coming up to just the embedded stuff they do, to the backstage interviews, to podcasts where these guys are doing interviews for people's different opinions. I'm soaking a lot of it up, and I'm trying to formulate a map out of what I think could happen. And obviously it's a combination of what other people are saying and the people that are closer to the sport, and just me being, around the age of some of these fighters, what I would do if the opportunity presented itself, which that's not happening. There's no chance that I would ever try to go into the UFC octagon and fight. One, because no skill, never done it. Not interested in getting my head knocked off. Two, well, I guess that is two. Not interested in getting my head knocked off. So, but if I was in that position, being 24 and being, savvy to how things kind of work, the marketing side of things, the social media side of things, how to promote that side of your business, versus maybe some of the older fighters that aren't quite savvy on, and I don't want to say disrespectful. It is kind of the way the business is now. You do have to go out and call people out, which is kind of against the mixed martial arts way. Be respectful, be humble, show sportsmanship, be prideful in yourself and your opponent, as far as take pride in your skills, but be humble in defeat and take pride in the opponent you're facing. Don't underestimate anybody. But in this era, you see a lot of the guys like Kevin Lee is my age. Phenomenal fighter, is rising through the ranks quickly, could be the next UFC star. I think he's in the same weight class as a Conor McGregor. So, depending on how the chips fall in this fight, could be the one fight other than maybe Nate Diaz that could kind of, okay, this guy's actually, Conor does sit back and evaluates what he wants next. And this guy could be the one guy that kind of throws the cog in the wheel there to say, okay, look, Nate Diaz, the trilogy fight isn't all that's there. There is this guy there that, could be the perfect dance partner, could help Conor. And I think a lot of people, Conor at his base is a fighter, but he also wants to make money. Excuse me. He wants to make money just like all these fighters do. They want the biggest fight. They want the biggest payday. And I think Kevin Lee could provide that to a Conor McGregor if he wins this fight. So Conor is the 155 champion. And was the 155 and 145 champion. He still considers himself both weight class champs, but calls himself the champ. But they vacated the 145, so he is the 155 champion. Hasn't defended the belt now so he won the belt, I think, last year, first Madison Square Garden card, whatever month that was in, maybe November last year. Won the belt there and hasn't defended it since. So, it's been a good little bit, and has done his whole thing with Floyd Mayweather and did the boxing route. Congrats to him. Obviously, get your money, my man. $100 million. That's set for life money. So I don't think he really needs to fight anymore. But of course, as a fighter, he would want to keep that. It's just an itch you can't get away from. It took me a long time to stop playing football. Even when I quit and moved on from Tennessee Tech, it was still that itch to where I was like, should I play those 2 more, years of eligibility I have? And it was tough to say no to. So I'm sure, obviously, when you do it at the highest level like he's doing, it would be the hardest thing to say no to somebody that would, that you want to fight. So if this fight piques his interest, obviously he'd come back. But regardless, Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee. So Kevin Lee, born in Detroit, Michigan, obviously Motown phenom, great wrestler. These guys actually went to the same school, same junior college, it says, which is cool. Obviously, Tony's a lot older than Kevin Lee is. But this is a fun fight, man. Tony brings such a weird style. Really long, really rangy for a 155er. I think they've got him at around 6 feet. So like 5'11". So he's a little bit longer for a guy weighing in at 155. Arms are a lot longer. He's got a really good submission game. He's got really good jiu-jitsu. Trains with the probably one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the world, Eddie Bravo at 10th Planet. He actually used to live close to where I lived when I was in California. He trained in Big Bear Mountain. So for all you guys in California that know where Big Bear is, that's where Tony Ferguson lives and trains. So he's training in that elevation that, people that if I went up there to snowboard like once and was having trouble breathing just because the elevation is a little bit higher up there, but he lives up there and trains up there. So he's constantly improving his cardio, probably has the best cardio of anybody in the 155 division. And quite honestly, with he, and I'm such a Conor fanboy, so it's hard to say this, but he might be the best 155er as far as the fighter that can match up with everyone. Tony Ferguson is a bad matchup for everyone, and he has no bad matchups. Like he is the favorable matchup with any fighter he faces, which is crazy to me. But it's his style. He's so, I don't want to say he's awkward, but it's just different. It's very different. He slides in, he slides out. He's got a different style of moving, throws unconventional kind of shots, has great boxing when he stands up and throws. But he comes in from and I wouldn't say it's the Conor McGregor where he comes in from different angles and hits you with weird shots from different angles. It's more of just a fluid motion where he's always moving. And it's hard to combat someone that isn't showing obviously conventional stand-up boxing or any kind of, Muay Thai stance or something. I won't say he's constantly switching between them, but he's just fluid. The fluidity in which he moves with is so different from everybody else. So it's hard to prepare for somebody like that, especially when he's got such good ground game and he's, has a wrestling background. So all those movements could just be, window dressing for I'm going to double leg you and slam you on your head and then get down, ground and pound with some elbows, some knees. So he's got such a different style that it's hard to pinpoint what you want to eliminate from him. And you eliminate one thing, he's got another thing to cover that. Whatever holes Tony Ferguson has, which, like every fighter, he does have holes. Maybe his technique's not the best because of the I wouldn't say wasted movement, but the movement he does, it's a lot of it. So technique will obviously come at a cost with that. So, but he covers it so much with, okay, here's this hole. I'm going to cover that with this. Like I'm going to cover that with, a double leg takedown. I'm going to cover that with a quick left hand and then get back into my movement, or a feint and then a single leg, or some kind of snap down. He's really big on his snap downs where he will get people by the back of the head, snap them down, and then throw the Darce choke on them. I'm throwing out a lot of terms here. Again, I'm not an expert. I don't know a ton, but I know what a Darce choke is just from asking a jiu-jitsu class, and it is not fun to be put into. It's even worse when you don't realize you're being put into it, and all of a sudden you can't breathe. You're going to sleep. So, pro tip out there for you guys: don't get caught in a darce choke walking the streets of wherever you're at. People are dangerous out there. But no, it's a fun fight, man, because Tony Ferguson has won, I think, 9 of his last 10. I mean, he's taken everybody in the 155 division out. No one wants to fight this guy. I mean, Conor, again, I'm a huge Conor fanboy, but Conor doesn't want that fight. I think Tony presents a problem that Conor could solve. I think Conor, could win that fight. I don't think he'd be as big a favored as he would be if he would fight Kevin Lee. So, because Tony Ferguson has beaten guys like Edson Barbosa, who's got great stand-up, has great power with his hands, great leg kicks, has beaten Rafael dos Anjos, who Conor was supposed to fight, who was the 155-pound champ. Again, great stand-up, great grappling. Tony Ferguson has run through that division, cleaned it all out. I think he has one loss to Michael Johnson, and that was, a while back. And other than that, the guy has been a stone cold killer running through the entire division. So it's hard to say he won't win the fight. Now, if he does win the fight, I don't know what you do with the division. I think Conor, if he wins the fight, I think Conor takes the third Nate Diaz fight, the trilogy fight, and holds up the division. Or they make Conor vacate the belt because, and I'm not by any means a purist. I've just now, in the last couple of years gotten into the sport, and really like the last year really gotten into the sport. But you do want to see some sort of payoff for the guys that are at the top fighting. You want to see that even if the guy isn't like a Conor McGregor or someone that just is great on the mic or is a great call-out guy or can just, chat people up left and right, but he's a great fighter and he's dedicated his time and his effort to this craft. I feel like those guys should be rewarded other than with, interim titles or ranking numbers. I feel like you should give them actual title shots. You should pay them like these guys, that you're paying in the main event. Obviously, they're not going to make as much pay-per-view because Conor McGregor's a great, businessman. He sells fights. If those people aren't selling fights, they're not going to make as much on their purse. I get that. But you need to pay them for victories what you pay these other guys. You need to give them the same opportunities. But when I'm saying pay these guys, I mean give them the same opportunities to make money these other guys are. If it doesn't work out, obviously, it is what it is. But it's just one of those things where at some point you have to go back to structuring. Unless you want, something more sports entertainment, more toward the WWE route. If you want that, then that's what you get with, Conor McGregor holding up the division for a year or so. So it's tough to say what's best for the UFC, but I think that Tony Ferguson winning this fight is, I don't want to say probably, but it looks like that's the probability would be on the favor of Tony Ferguson by some kind of submission, or because he's a finisher of fights. He doesn't let a lot of fights go to decision. So I would say that. And then on the other side of things, not to discredit Kevin Lee, because Kevin Lee is a monster as well. Loves the rear naked choke, loves to wrestle people to the ground, get their back and choke them to death. Like he loves, that's Kevin Lee's game. And he's got, over the press conferences this week, he's been talking about people are sleeping on my hands. People are sleeping on my stand-up. That's what he's been saying to the press. And so I'm interested to see if he does have those hands, if he can really stand and box with Tony Ferguson. And again, it's not going to be one of those things where these are two high-level guys. They're not going to stand and trade with each other. And from just the stuff, the small stuff I've seen of Kevin Lee and the work I've seen from Tony Ferguson, they're not going to start quickly. They're not going to rush out of the gate and start throwing hands back and forth and just slinging leather. It's not going to happen. Both are easily going to ease into the fight, get into their groove, and then really pour it on in those later rounds. Now, we haven't seen Kevin Lee go to the 4th and 5th round, the championship rounds yet, so we don't know how that's going to go. There's so many questions that need to be answered, but the biggest one, and I think this is the one thing I took from this fight week, there were a couple opinions of what would happen if Kevin Lee won. Again, I got to give a shout out to Brendan Schaub, the Big Brown podcast, the Big Brown Breakdown, excuse me. He had the coolest idea that I want to kind of elaborate on. He was talking about say Kevin Lee wins this fight. Say Kevin Lee comes in, starches Tony Ferguson, hits him with an overhand or something to end the fight, because I feel like Kevin Lee does have the knockout power. Tony Ferguson can finish the fight, but I don't feel like he's knocking Kevin Lee out. Again, I don't know. It's just from what I see, I feel like Kevin Lee has more knockout power in those hands. And if he wants to throw him, I haven't seen him really open up and really, wing shots. But if he's going to do that, this would be the time, obviously with technique and with discipline. But if you're going to sling leather with anybody, the only way you're going to get Tony Ferguson out of there, I feel like, is with a KO. You're not going to beat Tony Ferguson with a decision. I think he's got such a high motor. He controls the octagon. He puts pressure on you from the jump. So, but this is the interesting thing. Say Kevin Lee wins. Say, something happens. Kevin Lee hits an overhand right, knocks out Tony Ferguson, new interim champ at 155. Conor McGregor would take that fight. Conor McGregor would see a guy, and obviously Kevin Lee would have to do because they bring the microphone into the octagon after the fight, and they do the call out. And he's said in interviews he's already got something ready for Conor on his call out, so people are, I'm guessing, waiting to hear that. But say he gets on the mic and says some slick stuff, and all of a sudden, that crowd kind of sees, whoa, who is this guy? Who is this guy talking really brash to the guy that talks really brash, And just a little rumbling start. And I don't know a lot, but I think Conor McGregor would take that fight. Because Kevin Lee is young. Because Kevin Lee has a name now. Because Kevin Lee can talk, dresses well, great fighter. Conor doesn't have to sell. And it's almost like the smaller version of the Floyd-Conor fight. Now, Conor obviously is the A side, and that was a whole big thing with them. Floyd said he was the A side, Conor was the B side, but Conor dominated those press conferences. I mean, Floyd held his own, but Conor was the talk of the press conferences. He did a lot of the talking. He did a lot of the build-up. And a lot of people tuned into that fight, and more than would have tuned in if Floyd's fighting whoever else. Conor brought so many people over from the UFC, from just mixed martial arts in general, from Europe. Like, he brought so many people over. So now you have it on a smaller scale. You have Conor at the A side, and Conor's always selling the fights. And not that he doesn't genuinely feel it. That's what sells the fights, is there's a genuine, organic, build between those two people of what's going to happen. And he's very witty on the mic. He dresses well. He has the Mystic Mac persona where he just predicts things and uses the law of attraction to will things into reality, which I'm going to do a podcast on the law of attraction because I think it's such an interesting concept, and done right and really truly 100% committed to. You see a guy like a Conor McGregor that 100% commits to, what he wants, and almost wills, which is nuts to think about, just wills something physically into reality. And, it's almost some kind of, magic to think about, almost, fairy tale stuff, but it's true. It works, So I want to talk about that in another podcast, but crazy stuff. But you see a guy like that who has so much confidence in himself that he's not afraid to say the things that people are, other people are afraid to say or don't believe, but are saying just as as an act. But then you got this guy, Kevin Lee, who could be the B side, who can, now Conor doesn't have to do everything. He doesn't have to call Nate Diaz, a young cholo from the hood or whatever. He doesn't have to say he's making animal balloons with the right hand and gun sounds with the left hand. Like, he doesn't have to drop these one-liners, and he'll do that, but he's not going to be the only one doing it. He doesn't have to, put the backpack on and carry it the entire way. And that's, one of the reasons he didn't want to take the second Nate Diaz fight at UFC 200. He, was tired of always having to carry the weight of the press conferences. He didn't want to do them. He wanted to train for his fight. So this is something where now Kevin Lee can help, and that's just going to build it more. So you take Kevin Lee, who's fresh off of a win over Tony Ferguson, obviously, if the chips fall that way, and you put him against a Conor McGregor returning his first fight in the UFC after now gaining boxing fans, because he put up a respectable fight. Obviously, I mean, his first professional fight, he goes 10 rounds with the best to ever do it, arguably. I mean, I don't know anybody else on the planet that's doing that. I don't think you give me any other person in the UFC, they're not doing that. I don't think you give me any amateur boxer, they're not doing that. So, I think Conor and Kevin Lee would be a good kind of matchup. One, I think it's a better matchup for Conor. I think he feels more comfortable taking that fight because, let's face it, Tony's a killer, and you're not going to get those pay-per-view numbers that you'd get with Kevin Lee. So I think that would be a fight that he would take, the winner of those two. So it's just crazy how it affects. This fight will affect other things else. I mean, every fight does, obviously, but this one on a higher scale because now you're bringing Conor McGregor back into the fold, who is the pay-per-view draw for the UFC. So you think about it, and Kevin Lee, this is the biggest fight of his life. To this point, I mean, this could be the biggest day of his life. And to have that much pressure on you is tough to deal with. You know, it's tough to sit there and look at a guy that's 25 who has burst on the scene in the UFC, and is just, really doing his thing. I mean, obviously he hasn't fought. He was kind of the Cody Garbrandt where they were ranked a little lower. Like Kevin Lee is ranked 7th right now. I think Cody was number 10 or 5 or something like that, and are jumping a lot of the guys, and people aren't happy about it, but who else could you make this fight with? Khabib Nurmagomedov can't make weight. A killer. I'm talking, might be the best grappler in the UFC. A straight up killer, but can't make weight at 155. So you can't trust the guy to put him in a main event for an interim title belt when he already pulled out of the fight with Tony Ferguson. And I didn't get news, but I read news today that they offered him this fight. They offered him the October 7th fight, and he turned it down again because when he tries to cut weight, his liver shuts down. Either find a way to do it healthy, which weight cutting is its whole separate issue, and I'll talk about that in another podcast, but either find a way to do it in a healthy manner or move up a weight class. If you're ragdolling people at 155, nothing's stopping you from doing it at 70. There's guys that move up from 155. Conor fought at 170. Nate Diaz has fought at 170. Robbie Lawler now fights at 170. Like, guys move up and fight that weight, and it's not going to kill him to get down to it. And he's a strong guy. I think he could still ragdoll people at 170. I mean, who wouldn't want to? If Khabib goes up to 70, this is off topic, but if Khabib Nurmagomedov, if you guys don't know who he is, 24-0, Russian fighter. I think he specializes. He's really big in Sabo wrestling, I think. But it's almost just him literally manhandling grown men and dragging them to the ground and pound, and just beating the brakes off these guys. Manhandle Michael Johnson, same card that Conor McGregor fought Eddie Alvarez on. But it's just he has so much time in between his fights because he either pulls out of fights, he can't make weight, he fights at catch weights, and he's just too big for the 155 division. And again, there's a whole separate issue with guys not fighting their walking around weight. Like I'm 200 pounds. Say I were to fight in the UFC or I were to fight in an organization, I would probably cut to 170 because that's where a lot of the guys that walk around at 200 are fighting at 185 or 170. It's crazy to think about. You're going to cut your body weight down 30 pounds just to make a fight and replenish yourself. I feel like it's very, very unhealthy and bordering on the line of shutting down organs. And Khabib, you saw his liver shut down. So it's why not move up? Why not go to 70 and try your luck? Who wouldn't want to see a Tyron Woodley, Khabib Nurmagomedov fight, or a Jorge Masvidal Khabib fight? Just like some of these killers in the 170 division that I think Khabib would gives a tough time to a lot of people. I think his grappling, even somebody like a Damian Maia, who's a great grappler, I bet Khabib takes him to the ground and beats the brakes off of him. And again, I don't know a lot, but just the eye test that I see, I mean, Damian Maia is a great grappler. Used the backpack on Jorge Masvidal, who's a killer on the feet. But to watch Khabib just ragdoll guys and just pick them up and throw them on the ground, get on top and brutally rain elbows and punches down, man, scary. And if you can't make 155, move up. He's undefeated. You rarely hear about this in the UFC anymore. In mixed martial arts, he's 24-0, undefeated. The guy's got to get it together, though. Anyway, got off topic there. The biggest thing you see, though, on the 155 division, there's a bunch of killers that Kevin Lee's jumped. He's jumped Khabib. He's jumped guys like, I guess Eddie Alvarez was ranked higher than he was. Tony Ferguson, even Nate Diaz, I think he's right around that area. So there's guys in that line that are pointing and saying, why is he getting this fight? Justin Gaethje, why is he getting this fight that I'm not getting? He's the more marketable guy. He's the only guy that that could and wanted to fight Tony Ferguson, from what I'm hearing. He's the one guy that pulled out Tony Ferguson. He was calling Khabib out after fights. Kevin Lee was. So this guy wants this fight. It's the biggest one of his life. So I say good luck to him. If I had to make a prediction, just based off I would want to see Kevin Lee fight because I want to see Conor McGregor fight. As a Conor McGregor fan and as a Kevin Lee fan, I think that would be a great fight. I think that they would show an explosion. I think the Tony Ferguson Conor would be a great fight. I think Tony Ferguson gives Conor a lot more problems. And as a Conor fan, I wouldn't want to see him lose, but I'd also want to see a great fight. So, and for Conor to take on and defend the belt, which, he hasn't done yet. So I do want to see that. I want to see him defend the belt, but Conor has enough money now. Conor McGregor has, upwards of $100 million. He can sit on and say, all right, well, I'm done with this. And probably, and this sport's brutal. So I don't think anybody would blame him for doing it. You got to get your money and get out while you can. But, if I'm picking the fight, I think again, this is the kind of Demetrius, and not to this extent, but the Demetrius Johnson-Ray Borg fight. I think Tony Ferguson has too many skills. I think he has so many weapons. There's so many question marks with Kevin Lee. I want to believe that he can stand and just throw bombs and connect with good technique and put Tony down, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it happen to Tony. So I would say I think Tony takes him into deep water. I think Kevin Lee, for his experience level, is an amazing fighter. I don't know what he does in those third and fourth rounds. So I think Tony, with his amazing cardio, his ability to take punches and move forward. I mean, he's just a tough, gritty guy. He just never stops. He's like the Terminator. He just doesn't stop. So I think Tony in the fourth round if he gets him in a Darce, that would be crazy. That's Tony's choke, is the Darce choke. So you could get him with the Darce. You could get him with the guillotine, the snap down. I don't see Tony, hitting him with a shot and knocking him dead right there. I think, maybe ground and pound, but I'm going to say submission. I'm going to say maybe Darce choke or guillotine in the fourth round from Tony Ferguson. So I've got Fabricio Werdum, early round. I've got submissions by everybody. Fabricio Werdum, first or second round, rear naked choke. I've got Demetrius Johnson. I'll say this: Demetrius Johnson by TKO, which I think I said earlier, TKO or submission to put, to prove. And I think he's going to put a little bit of showmanship in this fight as well. I think that he wants to prove to a lot of people that he's not just because he's a 125er doesn't mean that he can't have knockout power. And just because he's fighting the guy that's great at submissions doesn't mean he can't submit him. So I think he'll hit him with a big shot. He'll rock him. He'll take him to the ground. I think he'll submit him or TKO. And then, I think Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee is going to be a war. By no means is this going to be anybody walking through the other guy and just starching him. I don't think that's going to be the case for either guy. I think Kevin Lee's going to come out. They're both going to come out, feel each other out, for the first round maybe. Start to get in their grooves. I think Kevin Lee's going to throw some big shots. I think Tony Ferguson is going to take him and eat him and walk right through him. You can't break the guy's will. He just keeps coming at you. And Kevin Lee's the same way. Kevin Lee's a tough fighter, got great wrestling. He's probably the stronger fighter. If he does get Tony Ferguson's back, it's good night because he's putting you to sleep. But I just think Tony Ferguson's technique on the ground, his technique on the feet could get him in some trouble just because a lot of the movement opens you up for a lot of things. But I think his technique on the ground, I think his jiu-jitsu is amazing. I mean, you're getting taught by Eddie Bravo, who is probably the best or one of the best practitioners and teachers at 10 Planet Jiu-Jitsu. So Kevin Lee, I think, Tony Ferguson takes him into deeper water, maybe the third, fourth round. Just keeps those shots keep adding up. All of a sudden, his win's gone. Those body shots, the knees, the elbows to the head, put him on a different street, and here comes the Darce choke or the guillotine or the snap down and rear naked choke, and I think Tony Ferguson gets the W. And moving forward, like I said, I think with that being the case, I think Tony Ferguson probably gets they make Conor vacate and Tony Ferguson gets the belt. Maybe they do the unification fight, but from there, I think Demetrius Johnson and Cody Garbrandt is the fight to make, all pending on if Cody can win his fight at 217, which I will be doing a podcast on. So hopefully by that time I have more knowledge so that I'm not just throwing generalities like head movement and feet work and stance and takedown and single leg, like stuff like that. Like hopefully I actually know what I'm talking about by the time December rolls around. And maybe by then I'm not getting choked out so much in jiu-jitsu, so maybe I can talk more about that, but I'm just too much shame right now to talk about my jiu-jitsu career. Anyway, yeah, and then I think that Fabricio Werdum, obviously with this fight, you get a W there. It just adds to your resume, and then maybe you vie for one more shot at the title. Even though if Overeem wins his fight at 218, that would probably be the title fight to make with Stipe. But those are my 3 picks. I wanted to do a shorter one today because, again, I'm going to get back to work on the set for you guys, but I wanted to make sure that I got you guys all caught up. If you were big UFC fans, if you're not big UFC fans, tune in if you guys can. If it's on pay-per-view, so go check that out this weekend. I'm going to be doing probably a recap of the show too, so maybe look for that Monday or Tuesday. If you guys haven't already, follow me on Twitter at Wade Plemons. Follow me on Instagram, Wade_Plemons. Check the podcast out on iTunes. We're up on iTunes now, the Wade Concept. We're up on SoundCloud, Stitcher. This will be going up on the YouTube page hopefully either tomorrow or Friday, so you guys get a preview of the fights. And I hope that you guys have liked this. I'm gonna keep doing these. If you guys do, let me know in the comments. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe if you're new. This is the Wade Concept Podcast. We are debating everything, and we're out.